Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday, a hump day edition of the Southside Beat. My name is Chris Halicke, flying solo again here on the Southside Beat. Corey Christen covering mandatory minicamp, day 2 of mandatory minicamp at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. So his coverage, though, is on our website. We got stuff from Tara Lawson this morning on there. I already have a story at the top of the site. I urge you to go read it. He had a story on Arthur Smith yesterday. If you didn't go read it, go read it. Really, really good stuff that we're getting from minicamp so far. And I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to hit on today because we've talked enough the past couple days about Mike Tomlin and his contract extension. Said everything that really needs to be said there. Don't need to touch on it anymore. But I do want to talk about the rest of the coaching staff today because, well, shoot, it's not just Mike Tomlin coaching the team. There's a lot of coaches that have a hand in this. And shoot, I don't know about you, but I like a lot of what I'm hearing. And I'm talking about guys who have already been there, guys who are new. This is the first chance we're really getting to hear from the positional coaches. We get to hear from them again during training camp. We get opportunities as media members to request interviews, sometimes one-on-one, but sometimes they're in a much smaller group. If, you happen to request an interview with, Grady Brown, maybe somebody else did, and, you and one other media member will interview him at the same time, something, along those lines. But sometimes you get those conversations one-on-one, and those are typically the ones that you really, really want because you're getting something that nobody else is getting, because you get to ask the questions, you get to direct, steer the conversation. I'm excited about doing that once I'm up there for training camp and covering it. For now, though, just hearing what's being said by these guys during mandatory minicamp, from these position coaches, I like a lot of what I'm hearing. Like, to be completely honest. And one guy that I think is becoming pretty popular is Zach Azzanni, the new wide receivers coach, replacing Frisman Jackson, who was the previous receivers coach. Didn't seem like that the end of that relationship between the team and Frisman Jackson was, very, very good. But liking, just from the little clips that you can see from either OTAs or minicamp, you're like, okay, there's definitely a different coaching style there. And then the Steelers posted a video on their YouTube channel yesterday, I think it was. It was either yesterday or early today. I watched it today and only had a couple minutes of Azzanni talking. But there was one thing that he said that really, really kind of spoke to me, because it's kind of echoed. I mentioned it yesterday, how Mike Tomlin's contrition during his end of season press conference about the lack of playoff success recently, about guys such as Marquise Pouncey not getting a ring before they retired, and how he doesn't want the same thing for Cam Hayward. And so it seems like that is a theme that that coaches on the staff, both new and, I don't want to say old, but guys who have already been there, it seems like that urgency is definitely being it's contagious. That's the best way I can put it. And like I said, it's going throughout the entire coaching staff. This is one thing that Zach Azzanni said when he was asked about the current state of the receiver room right now. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion, externally about who the Steelers can acquire to be a legitimate number 2 alongside George Pickens. And you can go and you can, see Azzanni answer that question and Arthur Smith answer that question. And there aren't a lot of real answers there. There's obviously going to be a lot of, well, we got guys here that can do this. Azzanni said something along the lines of, the things aren't as rigid as, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, that, guys move inside and outside. And he's right with that to a certain extent. But The one thing that I feel that coaches don't typically do too often is um, admit failures either upon the players or upon themselves. And this is one thing that I saw Zach Ghazzani say, and I got the quote pulled up right here. He was asked about the current state of the room, how it's coming together, and he just was very, very honest, very blunt. Said, "We're growing. We're a work in progress. We're growing. Today was not a great day for us. All of a sudden, routine changes, schedule changes, more plays, all the things we've been working on for 8 weeks, they kind of went out the window at times. So growing, a work in progress." That to me is, I don't hear a lot of that. Typically it's a lot of, you might hear the phrases of "we're growing" or "we're a work in progress," stuff like that, but then that's immediately followed by "today was not a great day." Just very honest, very blunt, being like, "Yeah, the guys weren't great today." And that to me is refreshing. Some accountability, right? Because there needs to be, in order for there to be accountability, there's a lot of people that want Art Rooney to hold Mike Tomlin accountable. Well, Mike Tomlin's got to hold his coaching staff accountable, and the coaching staff has to hold the players accountable. So accountability needs to be there along every single rung of the ladder. You know what I'm saying? And when you hear stuff like that, it's refreshing, because I did not. I thought it was. It's one thing for you to actually see it. Like I could be there as a media member watching practice and observe that for myself. It's something completely different for a coach to just flat out tell you, "Yeah, today wasn't a good day." I thought that was refreshing to hear. I really did. More accountability is always a good thing, especially in today's day and age. I don't know why accountability seems like it's so difficult to find nowadays. And yeah. Matthew brings up a good point, because it's in Corey's story from Taylor Austin this morning. Matthew says, what do you think, Chris, about Terrell Austin and what he said about Fitzpatrick? Another, and this is not an admission of failure on the players, and this is an admission of failure on the coach himself. Terrell Austin, guy who's been there, guy who's, had some criticism from fans. Defense is, defense was, I think, tied for 6th in scoring last year. Okay, that's a good number. A lot of people might be expired. I was reading literally the word expired in the chat. That's what happens sometimes when you're trying to do two things at once. Try to talk and read at the same time. That might surprise a lot of people, right? That might surprise some people. Be like, "Wow, tied for 6th in scoring. I didn't think the defense was actually that good in terms of preventing points." But yeah, no, it doesn't change the fact that the defense has been a bit underwhelming. And last year was, there were some, now injuries were a big part of it. No doubt about that. The inside linebacker room was completely decimated. Cam Hayward played on one leg whenever he did play, missed several games. And Minkah Fitzpatrick missed several games, played hurt. But, and I even said this during the season last year, I was not a fan of how Minkah was being used in the defense. I was not a fan. I didn't like him playing so close to the line of scrimmage that often. And I really did not. I didn't like it. And so it's not what Minkah. That's not where Minkah is best. Can he make plays from there? Of course he can. He is a better blitzer than some people think he is. He's a very, very good tackler. His missed tackle percentage last year was very, very solid, very good. And so he can do things from there, but it really devalues what Minkah Fitzpatrick is, because Minkah Fitzpatrick is at his absolute best whenever he was doing what he was doing in 2022. And it's one of those situations where it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think that's why you saw the Steelers sign Deshaun Elliott because they got themselves a safety that can play in the box, right? They got themselves a safety that can play closer to the line of scrimmage. And Devontae Casey, absolutely at his best whenever he's playing in a traditional safety position. Minkah Fitzpatrick is at his best when he is playing that free safety / robber position. That's just when Minkah is at his best. That's when he is the best ball hawk he can possibly be. And Minkah is out. Obviously, the biggest impact Minkah can make is by intercepting the football, which is exactly what he did in 2022 because he finished tied with the league lead in interceptions. And so this is what Terrell Austin said about Minkah. And again, really refreshing to hear this stuff, especially from a coach who's already been there. It's one thing to hear, good things from coaches who are brand new. They're trying to make a good first impression. But this is from a coach who's been there and a guy who's, like I said, fans have given him some criticism and it's been warranted. This is what he said. Quote, "We all know what kind of football player he is," talking about Minkah. "Like I said, the biggest thing for us as coaches is to try and get all of our guys into the best positions possible so they can play as well as they can and play up to their abilities. And so last year, I probably failed in that regard because we tried to have him do too much stuff and we want to get back to really what makes him special," unquote. That's awesome stuff to hear. Probably my favorite quote from the entire offseason so far. I'm being completely, again, humility, accountability. Those are virtues that are very, very lacking in today. I'm not just talking about sports, but even in sports, which this is a sports show, so that's what we're going to talk about. I love hearing stuff like that. And especially whenever a lot of people can see it. A lot of people can see it happening. Like Minkah's a good football player. He's still a good football player whenever he's, doing what he was doing last year, but he's not Minkah. He's not that all pro best safety in the league whenever he's kind of not doing the things that he's normally doing well. And so for Terrell Austin to admit that, the contrition there, no hiding behind anything, just flat out. Yeah, it's awesome. I loved hearing that. And so, yeah, I really liked it. I really liked that a lot. Another quote, and this is not from a coach. This is actually from a player that I really liked to continue to go on this, coaching staff theme to kick off the show. Just really quick before we transition, that Pittsburgh Toddy asked, "What happened with Corey anyway?" I missed it. Corey is still here. He is actually he is working on the South Side right now as we speak. Practice is going on right now. So that's where Corey is. He is actually, getting work, gathering information, and, that will all be in the Steelers. We already have a little bit in the Steelers feed. We already have Corey has a story on Terrell Austin up on the site right now. After the show's over, go read it. You'll again, this is good stuff from Corey so far. First couple of days of minicamp. It's just minicamp is going on during our showtime. So I'm flying solo, trying to relay everything that I can from what's going on in minicamp. It was hard to do that yesterday because not a lot of information or even content at all had come from minicamp just yet. Because practice is going on like as we're doing the show yesterday, which is a lot of the reason why minicamp was kind of secondary to what we were actually talking about yesterday. And that's different today. I'm wanting to make sure that we're talking about stuff that's going on that's current, coming from minicamp. It'd be a lot easier whenever I'm there, and that can't come soon enough. Really quick, one more quote that I wanted to share. This was Justin Fields talking about new quarterbacks coach Tom Arth. And this one stood out to me because one of the biggest complaints I had about the Matt Canada offense. A lot of people want to talk about, it's a high school playbook. He drew it on the back of a coloring book, or there are a lot of jokes about Matt Canada's playbook and stuff like that. I think if you were to actually look at the playbook, you'd probably be like, oh wow, more complicated than I thought. It's just how NFL playbooks look nowadays. But to a certain extent, there were a lot of issues that I had with Matt Canada's offense. Attention to detail was one of the things that was severely lacking. It was easy to see on film. People that know the game better than I do, if you watched any of JT O'Sullivan's quarterback school or QB school videos on Kenny Pickett, he did an entire deep dive into Mitch Trubisky's game against the Patriots. Like, literally looked at every single snap from that game. You watch, somebody who's played the game, who understands the game at the NFL level, and watch them and listen to them explain certain things and break it down. Like, I feel like I know a good amount about the game, but then you hear that from somebody's perspective, and you have your own thoughts of being like, okay, details seem to be lacking here. And then you have somebody who's actually played the game at that level, knows the game at that level, and then they're like, yeah, details are all over the place. This is not an offense that's built on details. That's whenever you're like, crap. Like, okay, what I feared is correct, and that sucks, because you have to, especially with how complicated offenses are nowadays, with all of the option routes and so many different layers of complexities in offenses. Attention to detail is so huge. When do you run away from coverage? Okay, if you read zone, you sit down in coverage. You find a window, you sit down. Just so many different things. Attention to detail was very, very lacking. And so this is Justin Fields talking about Tom Arth today. He said, quote, "It's his attention to detail, the way he comes in each and every day. He's the same guy every day. To be honest, I don't think I've had a coach as detailed as Tom. He's very detailed in terms of practice review, sending us the info, breaking down each and every play, really just focusing on the details," unquote. I love hearing the word detail come up 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4. I could probably, maybe I'm missing a couple, but at least 4 times in one quote. The details is huge, and that's just coming from one member of the coaching staff. That's the quarterback's coach. Now, quarterback's coach, very important position, especially when you're talking about the kind of the medium between the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. Tom Arth is going to be that guy. Whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, who's under center playing the quarterback position, Tom Arth is going to be that in between. That's typically the way it goes. Ben Roethlisberger explained that really well on his own podcast. And I think it changes, with different coordinators, possibly. I think each coordinator has their own way of running things, their own way of establishing the hierarchy, to a certain extent. And when you hear things, like players really, really loving the attention to detail. I think even Pat Freiermuth, I don't remember where I heard it. I always want to give credit where credit's due. I don't remember which interview it was. He's done several this offseason with multiple. So if I sincerely apologize to whoever the interview was with, but I believe Pat Freiermuth has talked at least multiple times about the attention to detail in Arthur Smith's offense. And so when you hear multiple players talk about the details from the coaching staff, whether it be from a position coach, a coordinator, whoever it is, that again is refreshing to hear. And so I am very, very encouraged. Now, granted, it's June. We're in mandatory minicamp right now. We are still several weeks away from training camp beginning. Players report on July 24th. We're still a bit a ways away from that. But man, hearing this stuff even now is refreshing for sure. And I keep using that word but it is. And I don't want to overstate that. So I am very, very, I'm encouraged. I really am. I think it's good to hear this type of stuff from multiple places, from both, hearing admission of failure, from a coach talking about the players, coach talking about himself, player talking about attention to detail from the coaching staff. It's good stuff, man. Here we go in the chat. Pittsburgh Toddy says Canada wrote his playbook on the back of a napkin. Yeah, these jokes. These are the jokes, but yeah, it's the one of the biggest issues I had with Matt Canada's offense was the lack of details. It was all over the film. The way the routes were run at times. Not saying that the receiver was running the route incorrectly, but if it's not designed correctly, I remember one specifically. It was against the Browns, I want to say, the game in Cleveland. So it was Canada's last game, actually. And I don't remember if the play I think the play actually ended up resulting in a positive, like it might have been like a completion for a first down. But watching the way the concept was ran, there could have been so much more space for the player who ended up catching the ball. I remember that like typically in a lot of concepts, one route will clear for another route, right? Not saying that route can't be targeted. Maybe if the defense comes out in a certain coverage, that's an alert route, whatever the case may be. Every concept is different. But a lot of the time, for example, this wasn't what this play is, but I'll give it for an example. In a double post concept, there's typically a crosser going back the other way. And a lot of the time, the double post actually will clear for that crosser going back across. And in that Cleveland game, I remember specifically, there was a play in which Deontay was the crosser while Pickens and some other receiver, I remember it was Allen Robinson or Calvin Austin or who it was. They were the two running the double post. And Deontay was running the crosser, and the double post did exactly what it was supposed to do for the crosser. It cleared. Deontay was wide open. I mean, wide open. Not a guy within 10 yards of him in every direction. And Kenny tucked and ran. Got a first down. It was still a positive play, but you're not looking for just positive plays and always moving the chains. You're also looking to take chunks out of the defense. And that play absolutely would have taken a chunk out of the defense. And in the one that in the game that I'm, a lot of the time, sometimes, if it happens on a play that ends up with a positive result, you don't always pay attention to it. But I remember there was a route where George and Deontay were stacked, and Pickens' route should have gone deeper. And if it went deeper before he broke out of his route, it would have forced the corner it would have put more stress on the corner to do one of two things. And would have either made George wide the heck open down the field, or it would have made Deontay even more open than he already got. And if it wasn't a receiver as good as Deontay is at getting separation, then it might not have been a completion. But because Deontay is so good at creating separation, even in tight spaces, there was enough separation there for Kenny's throw to get there for a completion. But that could have been a lot easier if George ran a deeper route. Now, why didn't George run a deeper route? Is it because George was being lazy and didn't run the route correctly? Or is it because Matt Canada and Frisman Jackson and whoever else didn't properly coach the concept for George to run the route deeper? And George ran it exactly how it was supposed to be coached. Typically, that's usually the way it is. You typically don't find a lot of NFL receivers who run routes that badly. Typically, when you're talking about lack of route running, it's the inability to create separation. It's, it's typically those things, not getting enough acceleration or quickness out of a break, whatever it is. It's typically not, oh crap, I was supposed to run 12 yards and then break instead of 9 yards or whatever it is and then break. That typically comes down to coaching, not the receiver. So, and Damon says the importance of having a good wide receiver coach. It's also the importance of having a good coordinator. The coordinator is the guy who ultimately the buck stops with. Why isn't this concept being coached better? It was good enough to get a positive result, but you needed a perfect throw from Kenny. You needed Deontay to get elite separation in order to make that play happen. If the concept is coached better, maybe Kenny doesn't have to have a perfect throw. Maybe Deontay doesn't have to get the elite separation, right? This is what I'm talking about. And this is where everybody who is pro Kenny or pro Deontay or whoever else can pipe up and say, yes, Matt Canada's offense sucked because it lacked little things like that made everything more difficult for the player to execute the call that was made. Little things like that. It's stuff that often gets overlooked. Ben asks, has Canada said anything since his firing? If he has, I have not seen it. So, yes. So when you saw all over the film last year, little bitty details about the offense, just all over the place, making it harder to execute plays, really forcing players to have to be perfect way more often than they possibly can be. Because even like these are NFL quarterbacks, these are NFL receivers, they should be doing things at a very, very high level, but they're also going up against other NFL players who also do things at a very, very high level. You can get away with more at the college level because you're playing against, even if you're playing in the SEC or the Big Ten or the better conferences, you're still going to have overall worse competition against you. You are playing against the best of the best when you're playing in the NFL level. It doesn't matter if you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs or the Arizona Cardinals. It does not matter. You're going up against NFL players. And most of the time, you can't, the margin for error is a lot smaller at the NFL level than it is in college. And it is the coordinator's job and the coach's job to make things as easy as possible for the players to execute the plays called. And when the attention to detail is terrible, not just average, but terrible, it makes it that much harder for players to properly execute plays and to properly succeed, which is why I think you saw Kenny regress. Could he have been better if he had a better coordinator? Yes, I do think so. I'm as critical of Kenny as anybody else. I think that he's got flaws in his game that go beyond the coordinator, but the coordinator didn't do him any favors either. Right? Even if they called a lot of concepts that Kenny liked, shallow cross is one of them. Kenny really loved running that shallow cross, and man, that was a staple of Matt Canada's offense. Sometimes it worked, but man, it's kind of old school. It's kind of old school. So, yeah, it's so when you hear now, it's not like Justin Fields is coming from this awesome establishment in Chicago. But when you hear Justin Fields say this might be the most detail-oriented coach I've ever had, positive thing. For sure. And I think the main thing that we have to, again, focus on is bare minimum here. Bare minimum. If you're looking for optimism, bare minimum, this offense should be better based on just the moves that they've made, specifically with the coaching staff. Brand new coordinator, brand new quarterbacks coach, brand new receivers coach, offensive line coach stays the same, running backs coach stays the same. Those two are probably always going to keep their jobs. Pat Meyer is very respected there. Eddie Faulkner, very respected there. Respected enough to be interim coordinator last year after they fired Canada. And so I think based off of what I see, the offense, the floor is higher, no doubt. I think I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would argue that differently, even for the biggest naysayer out there, the biggest anti-Mike Tomlin person, the biggest anti-Arthur Smith person. I still think if you argue that Arthur Smith is not an upgrade over Matt Canada, then I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you. But I think that goes without saying. So I think just overall the floor is raised for this offense. Now, it still has to come together. It's still got to make sense. It's still got to mesh. And whether that's Russell Wilson at quarterback, whether that's Justin Fields at quarterback, the usage of the running backs, how the workload is divided up. I think Najee Harris needs to be involved in the passing game more often. He was a good receiver at Alabama, a very good receiver at Alabama. I illustrated that in my latest Chalk Talk, man, up against Patrick Queen at LSU. A game between Alabama and LSU in college. Man, Najee caught a back shoulder fade up against Patrick Queen. Queen was right there. Perfect coverage. Great throw. Najee makes a perfect play on it. Back shoulder fade, makes the catch, touchdown. So, yeah. And see, this is where we begin to, where the discourse can kind of begin. Ben asks here, the question, does Arthur Smith do enough to slide into Tomlin's chair in 2027? I don't think that's even a question right now. Because, first off, if the offense is better, right, and I think even the biggest naysayer would probably say the offense is going to be better. That doesn't mean the offense is going to be top 5, doesn't mean it's going to be top 10, doesn't mean it's going to be top half of the league. It could just be better. But if the offense is better, and it should be, it better be, I'll put it that way. But if the offense is better and the defense is at least the same, if not better, and again, injuries absolutely played a role, not looking to make excuses, but man alive, they were decimated by injuries last year. If they aren't as beaten down with injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and that defense is good, top 5 in scoring, which is not a far-fetched idea. Again, they were tied for 6th in scoring last year. They just need to get better at limiting chunk plays. They were one of the best teams in the red zone, defenses in the red zone last year, at forcing teams to settle for field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. That all happens, man. The Steelers, the arrow should be pointing up, right? It should be pointing up. And if that happens, they get some playoff wins. They break that streak. Tomlin's not going anywhere. And Arthur Smith, I think Arthur Smith, more than anything, his most likely trajectory is back to becoming a head coaching candidate elsewhere. If he succeeds as an offensive coordinator, because it was his work as offensive coordinator in Tennessee that helped get him the job as head coach in Atlanta. He was a great coordinator, 2 phenomenal years with the Titans as offensive coordinator. Had good personnel, no doubt about it. But a lot of people just want to credit Derrick Henry for being Derrick Henry at his absolute best for Arthur Smith's offense. Man, I don't think it's also a coincidence that Derrick Henry's 2 best seasons were under Arthur Smith. They were. So, Mark says, not being picky, Chris, but Najee beat Roquan Smith for that TD. You're thinking of, you might be thinking of Steelers Ravens. I'm going back to when Najee was playing for Alabama up against LSU, and that was absolutely Patrick Queen. Number 8 linebacker for LSU, that was Patrick Queen. But if you're thinking about the Kenny play, where he rolled to the left and threw it to Najee for the touchdown, and that wasn't a back shoulder fade. That was like an over-the-shoulder catch. But again, that just goes to show you that Najee can make different kinds of catches down the field. Use Najee in the passing game more. Make that less predictable that, hey, when Najee's on the field, we're going to run. And when Jalen's on the field, we're probably going to throw. Like, make that less predictable, And Arthur Smith is better. Not quite as good as the Sean McVays of the world, in which last year the Rams ran out of 11 personnel 93.1% of the time. That means that the entire offense is pretty much ran out of 1 personnel. 1. You want to make everything look the same coming out? Like, that's whenever you get defense to go, okay, I don't know what's coming. Because you're making everything look the same. But there are instances in Arthur Smith's offense, even in Atlanta, in which he has sequenced plays where same formation over like consecutive plays in a row. One's a run, one's a play action, it's same formation, you know. That's the kind of stuff you want to see. You want to see things, and nobody ran out of 12 personnel more than Atlanta did last year. Atlanta was second in play action usage. So you want to keep teams guessing. Those are ways to do it. Run a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff out of the same personnel, same formations, and then play action. Play action on first down nowadays is almost a cheat code. It really is. I don't get it. I don't know why the Steelers used play action so little last year. Only 5 teams used it less often last year. So, yes, the offense should be better. And when you hear things, to kind of tie a nice little bow on this, when you hear things coming from the coaching staff, positive things, or even from the players talking about the coaching staff, it's not just Arthur Smith. It's not just Mike Tomlin. All these other guys absolutely play a role in things. You know, and it's a lot of fun to have those conversations with the position coaches, because you really get to, because that is where a lot of the detail is coached up, right? And I love to see how players react to it. I love to see how coaches go about their business, how they their explanations for how they go about their business. And so Devon says here, I can't wait until we all can all stop guessing what's going to happen and see what Smith offense actually looks like. I'm too excited. I listen. I agree. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see it too. The one thing I'm really curious of is if we're going to see a lot of the same type of Arthur Smith offenses in which he's used wide zone. That a few years ago, especially around the time in which he was the coordinator at Tennessee, that might have been the peak of when wide zone was really taking advantage of defenses at the NFL level. And that, again, might be one of the reasons. It could have been a lot of stuff that played a role into why Tennessee's offense was so good in 19 and 20. But that's around the time that wide zone was really having its most success. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Arthur Smith, all these offenses that were using a lot of wide zone, they were having their way with defenses. And here recently, again, it's a cat and mouse game. Defenses are constantly adjusting to stop offenses from what they're doing, and then it's somebody else's job. And typically it's the Kyle Shanahans and Sean McVays of the world that are the trendsetters, and they'll adjust. And here recently, with the way defenses have combated against wide zone and stuff like that, typically using a lot of too high shell stuff, last season, Sean McVay with the Rams, they went to a lot more gap concepts as opposed to wide zone stuff. A lot more gap. They ran duo more than any other concept last year, and Kyron Williams was one of the top rushers in the NFL last year. Immediate results from a significant philosophy change. Okay, so I'm curious to see if Arthur Smith does something similar. Now, I said I made a case for it in Chalk Talk. I made a case for it on the show yesterday that Najee's a better outside zone runner than a lot of people give him credit for. The numbers back that up. They're in my Chalk Talk. Go read it. Numbers are there. He is a better outside zone runner than people want to than people think he is. So I think he can run the wide zone stuff with Arthur Smith because Arthur Smith can coach the details up better. And with the talent that they have, the athleticism they have on the offensive line, I think they can do it. But then again, when you look at what the Steelers did last season after Matt Canada was fired, and Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan went with more gap concepts than zone, they didn't do more gap than zone overall. The percentage was a lot more evened out. Before Canada was fired, it was much more zone than it was gap. And then that gap was bridged a lot shorter. And when that happened, Najee's numbers seemed to go up. So maybe maybe Najee is best used for gap. Maybe he is. I don't know. He's also a good outside zone runner. Numbers back that up too. But I also can't argue with 4.64 yards per carry last season, which is what Najee had whenever from the time, he had 4.64 yards per carry in gap concepts after Matt Canada was fired last year. That's way above his career average of 3.9. So, and Arthur Smith, Jerry says it here. Arthur Smith is better and is getting to know the players better and better. And Arthur Smith even said that he's not going, he said it yesterday when he was talking to the media, that he's not going to be rigid in the way that he does things, that he, you have to tailor the offense to what you have, personnel wise. Like, you're not going to try to ask Russell Wilson to be a drop back traditional pocket passer. You just can't. That's not his game. Right? That's not Justin Fields' game either. You're going to have to implement things in offense that best suit your quarterback. You're going to have to implement things on offense that best suit your running backs and your receivers and your offensive line. You're not going to ask a bunch of big, unathletic maulers on the offensive line to run wide zone. You're going to ask them to play gap and punch everybody else on the other side of the ball, in the mouth and push them back. That's, personnel matters. And so I think when you look at what the Steelers have, they do have a lot of athleticism up front, which does make me think like all 5 or even 6 guys that you would consider, up for the starting job, for the 5 starting offensive linemen, all of them are athletic. All of them can move. All of them can pull in the running game. So again, I would not just automatically assume that Arthur Smith is going to do the same thing that Sean McVay did and just become way more of a gap team. But could we see more gap than we've typically seen from Arthur Smith? Maybe. We'll see. But I share that same sentiment. I am very, very much looking forward to what this offense actually looks like when they line up in actual football situations up against another team, even in preseason, right? We won't see the real thing until the regular season begins, in terms of how they're actually trying to strategically beat the team across from them, which you don't see in preseason. Preseason, everything's reflective. Everything is internal. You're executing the plays to try to, as part of the final stages of installing the offense or installing the defense. That's what preseason's for. You're not trying to actually game plan and strategize to beat the team on the other side. You're still trying to get all the T's crossed and the I's dotted with your own stuff in preseason, so that by the time week 1 comes around, now you can have everything in order as best you can so that you can game plan and strategize to beat the other team, on the other side of the field. So, excuse me. That is, I think that's a wrap for the show today. So, let's see. I like Bob's prediction here. Bold prediction: Warren Harris hit 1,200 yards this year. Each, Bob? Like each guy runs for 1,200 yards? Or is that 1,200 yards from scrimmage? Because that itself isn't that bold of a prediction, right? Najee and Jalen were one of 2 running back duos last year to each get 1,000 yards from scrimmage last year. The Lions were the only other team to have a running back duo each clip 1,000 yards from scrimmage. So 1,000 yards from scrimmage for each guy, they've already done that. They could do it again, but 1,200 yards rushing, that would mean at least 2,400 yards rushing. It's possible. It depends on how often this team runs the football and how successful they are with it, and how often they aren't playing from 2 or 3 touchdowns behind. Because remember, there were a couple games last year where running the ball quickly became, sorry, we're not running the ball this game. Week 1 against the 49ers, sorry. Najee had a good yards per carry in that game, but they couldn't take advantage of it. They had to start throwing the ball because they fell behind by, 8 million scores. All righty. Thanks, everybody, for joining the show today. We will at some point, whether it's tomorrow or Friday, we will have Corey on at least one more time. It's his last week at the company. Really appreciate all the work he's doing at minicamp. Getting us a lot of good content from there. Like I said, read off some of the quotes today that we're getting from minicamp. It's awesome. It really is. I wish I were there. Saw a question earlier. I'll wrap this up. Barbara's asking, how's the selling going, Chris? It has slowed down, to be completely honest, and it sucks. So we're doing everything we possibly can to get the house sold. Part of it is I live in the 6th fastest growing city in North Texas, and there is a lot of new build inventory here. A lot of new build inventory. I mean, and it's not just new build. It's like very, very affordable with a lot of incentives. So trying to sell when there's already a lot of pre-owned listings, and not even mentioning the fact of all the new build inventory, there's a lot of people that just don't even want to look at the existing homes, and they, so it's challenging, but I have told DK, and I'm sticking to it one way or another. I will be there by training camp, but we are obviously hoping. Hey, Tito, I'm here in Fort Worth. Nice, man. Not. I mean, it's not a hop, skip, and a jump from me, but it's close enough. I'm on the east side of Dallas. I'll put it. I'm 30 minutes east of Dallas. So, yeah, we're doing everything we can. For sure, we're doing everything we can. One really quick question, just to kind of tend to some business. That's Bied asks, has Corey's replacement been chosen, or are you going to go solo? Yes, he is. Yes, we have a replacement. I don't remember exactly when he's starting with the company, but yes, we have a replacement. So I would think that he's going to join me on the show. I would think so. Either way, the show goes on, and who knows? Maybe I'll finagle a way to get a special guest or two in the meantime. I don't know. We'll see. I got some connections. Maybe I can try to, especially after mandatory minicamp's over, and the plug gets pulled. The one time a year the plug gets pulled from the NFL, and the NFL actually goes dark. Yeah. HMJ077 says, yeah, don't forget, Chris, people will still have to qualify for the loan. Yes, that's true. And that's what makes selling a house where there's a lot of new build inventory. That's what makes it so difficult, because a lot of these new build inventory, there are so many incentives of more and more people are able to qualify for certain loans. And even if, like, maybe in certain areas, the credit score that you have would only be able to get you to qualify for a loan, but maybe in this area, not only do you qualify for the loan, but you also qualify for 0 down or closing costs covered or whatever else it is. That kind of stuff helps when it comes to buying new build versus buying pre-owned. Even though the house has a brand new roof, it has brand new carpeting. It's a yeah, and Mr. CJ Jr. says it, selling a used house is difficult in new construction areas. And yeah, like some of the feedback we've gotten, like a lot of people are like, the house is good. It's just there's some of the walls need painted, or some some people are like, I might want to do something different with the flooring. It's like those are typical things, and typically you could go in and you could negotiate. If you want to make an offer and get under contract, those things can be negotiated with the seller. You can be like, can you at least have all the walls painted before we move in? Sure. Like that's something that's either something I could do myself, or if I really am have my hands tied, I'll just pay somebody else to do it. Dude, this is the thing that gets me. Mr. CJ Jr. says petty stuff, shaking my head. Dude, you have no idea. When I'm looking at a house, I don't look at, if I'm looking at a house that is currently being lived in, I don't look at other people's stuff, because that stuff's not staying. I might look at the way that they have like furniture laid out in the living room and being like, oh, I like that layout, or I might do this different. but I'm not like looking at their stuff and judging the house based off of their stuff because it's not staying. How new is the roof? That's pretty important. If you live in Texas, that's really important, but it's important everywhere. It's really important in Texas because of the heat that we get and because of the severe wind we get here. Roofs have to be replaced every 8 to 10 years here. So it's crazy. But we've gotten so much feedback. That's all cosmetic stuff on the inside. And it's not like I'm not going to, but I could do it like a tour through my house and you would be like, looks like a nice place to live. But they look at like, oh, the walls might look a little, well, yeah, I got 2 young kids. The walls are probably a little paint. It's easy. But you're going to let that be the deciding factor? That's where I get frustrated. But it's just part of selling a house, man. And especially whenever rates are where they are. And that's what really sucks. That's another thing that is difficult. So, all right. I'm done complaining about it. Thank you for letting me vent about that because everything is preventing. Again, I'm going to be out there for training camp, but that William says paint it. Yes, we have. I'm just saying, like, when you're looking at like other things that needed to be done, like we had to replace the roof, like that needed to be done. We had hail damage, like that had to be done. And that was a very time consuming process from the time that we made the claim to the time the roof actually got replaced, weeks upon weeks because of all of the process that have to. So yes, we have done cosmetic stuff on the inside. I'm just saying that whenever that's the type of feedback that you're getting, and that's what's preventing them from not even, like I said, you can make an offer, get under contract, and then be like, we want the walls, every single wall in the house repainted. Okay, that's fine. I will easily acquiesce. Very, very much easy. Look forward to that. So anyway, I'm going to go and wrap it up. Peace, guys. Thank you so much. We are definitely going to be up there for sure. But William, Texas people are spoiled. I love it. Love you guys so much. Appreciate it. See you guys tomorrow. Catch you guys on the flippity flip.